Cole stood in front of the mirror and fixed his collar for the 10th time. His hands were shaking. Today was the biggest day of his life, and he was terrified of making a mistake. He was a linguist aboard the starship Horizon's Edge. His job was simple. He translated languages and helped people from different cultures understand each other. But today, he would not be translating between humans. Today, he would be part of humanity's first formal meeting with the collective. They were famous across the galaxy. They were one of the oldest and most advanced species in known space. Their technology was hundreds of years ahead of humanity's. Their ships were faster, their weapons were stronger, and their scientists had solved problems that humans could not even understand yet. But they were also known for something else. They were cold, logical. They showed no emotion, and they looked down on species that did. Many other species had tried to form alliances with all of them had failed. They considered them too primitive, too emotional, too weak. Now it was humanity's turn to try. Captain Lisa Monroe had been very clear in her briefing. This was humanity's one chance. They had agreed to meet, but they could walk away at any moment. Everyone needed to be perfect, professional, calm. Took a deep breath. He could do this. He just needed to stay quiet, translate when asked, and not cause an interstellar incident. The reception hall aboard the Horizon's Edge had been transformed for the occasion. The lights were soft and blue, matching the preferences listed in the cultural database. The temperature had been lowered to what humans found uncomfortably cold but found pleasant. Everything had been planned down to the smallest detail. Stood near the back of the human delegation, behind Captain Monroe and the senior diplomats. He was not important. He was just there to help if anyone needed translation assistance. That was good. The less attention on him, the better. The doors opened, and they entered. Had seen pictures of them before, but pictures did not prepare him for the real thing. They were tall and slender, with silver-blue skin that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. Their eyes were large and violet, and their faces were sharp and elegant. They moved with perfect grace, like dancers or predators. At the front of their group walked Ambassador Rand. He was older than the others, with darker markings on his skin and an expression that suggested he had already decided this meeting was a waste of his time. Behind him came his advisors and guards, all wearing the same cold, distant expression. And then saw her. She walked at the back of the group just like him. She was younger than the others, with softer features and curious eyes that moved around the room, taking in everything. Unlike the other, who stared straight ahead, she actually seemed interested in what she was seeing. Her skin was a lighter shade of silver blue, almost luminous. Delicate patterns traced across her cheeks and down her neck, like frost on a window. Her violet eyes caught the light and seemed to sparkle. Forgot to breathe. The formal greetings began. Captain Monroe stepped forward and welcomed the delegation in carefully rehearsed words. Ambassador Rand responded with equal formality. Everything was going according to plan. The negotiations started. Both sides spoke about trade agreements, technology sharing, and mutual defense. They were polite but distant. They asked many questions and gave few answers. Could see the frustration growing on Captain Monroe's face, even though she hid it well. Then Ambassador Rand turned to look at the human delegation. His eyes swept over them like they were objects in a museum. "We have studied your species," he said. His voice was cold and flat. "You are young, emotional. You wage wars over feelings and beliefs. You let passion guide you instead of logic. Tell me, Captain Monroe, why should we ally ourselves with a species that cannot even control its own impulses?" The room went tense. This was the question everyone had feared. How could humanity defend itself against the accusation that it was too emotional, too chaotic, too human? Captain Monroe started to respond, but Ambassador Rand raised a hand. "Words are easy," he said. "Show us. Let one of your people demonstrate a human cultural practice. Let us see what humans truly value." Captain Monroe hesitated, then her eyes found. "Mr. Cole," she said, "please step forward." His heart stopped. This was not supposed to happen. He was supposed to stay in the back, stay quiet, not cause an interstellar incident. But he could not refuse a direct order from his captain. He stepped forward on legs that felt like water. "Ambassador," he said, his voice only slightly shaking, "humans have many cultural practices. One of the most basic is the greeting. When we meet someone, we often shake hands." He demonstrated the motion. "It is a sign of trust and respect." Ambassador Rand looked unimpressed. Physical contact as a greeting, interesting, and what else? His mind went blank. He needed to say something. He needed to demonstrate something human. He looked around the room desperately, and his eyes landed on the young woman at the back of their group. She was watching him with those curious violet eyes. Her head was tilted slightly, like a bird studying something new. Without thinking, gestured toward her as an example. Humans also express appreciation for things we find admirable. We use words to describe what moves us. We say things like. He trailed off. She was looking right at him now. The light caught her silver-blue skin. Those patterns on her face seemed to shimmer. "She's beautiful," he whispered. The words were not meant to be heard. They were just a thought that escaped his lips, but his translator was still active. It picked up every word and broadcast them clearly in the language. The room went completely silent. Ambassador Rand's expression turned to stone. The other elders looked shocked. Captain Monroe closed her eyes like she was watching her career end in real time. But the young woman did something no one expected. The patterns on her skin, which had been a pale silver, suddenly flared with color. Soft pink and gold light spread across her cheeks and down her neck. Her violet eyes went wide. Her lips parted. She stepped forward, away from her group, closer too. Everyone stared at her in disbelief. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "Say it again, human." Could not move. He could not speak. He had just done exactly what Captain Monroe had warned him not to do. He had caused an interstellar incident. And from the looks on everyone's faces, nothing would ever be the same. The diplomatic talks ended immediately after the incident. Ambassador Rand gathered his delegation and left without another word. The young woman, whose name still did not know, was pulled away by two older before she could say anything else. She looked back at him once as she left, her skin still glowing with those strange colors. Then she was gone. Captain Monroe did not yell at. That would have been easier. Instead, she just looked at him with tired eyes and told him to wait in his quarters until she decided what to do with him. Her silence was worse than any punishment. Sat on his bed and stared at the wall. He kept replaying the moment in his head. The words had just slipped out. He had not meant to say them out loud. He had certainly not meant for his translator to broadcast them to an entire room of alien diplomats. But he had. And now humanity's chance at an alliance with the most advanced species in the galaxy was probably ruined. Because of him. Because he could not keep his mouth shut. A knock came at his door. It was Dr. Hart, the ship's chief medical officer and closest friend. "I heard what happened," said as he walked in. "The whole ship is talking about it." Groaned and buried his face in his hands. "I know I'm dead. My career is dead. Humanity's future is dead. Everything is dead." Sat down next to him. "Maybe it's not as bad as you think. I called an alien diplomat beautiful in front of her father and the entire delegation. How could it possibly be worse?" Was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled out his tablet. "I did some research after I heard. They have some interesting cultural rules about emotion." Looked up. "What do you mean?" "They don't show emotion in public, ever. It's considered deeply shameful. They believe that emotions are dangerous, that they lead to conflict and chaos, so they suppress them. They train themselves from childhood to never let their feelings show." Felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. So what that woman did when her skin changed color. Those patterns are called luminescent markings, explained. They glow when it experiences strong emotion. The fact that hers lit up in front of everyone means she lost control. She showed the entire delegation that she felt something. Because of what I said. Because of what you said, nodded. In culture, what she did was like screaming in the middle of a church. It was a complete loss of composure. Her career could be over. Her family could be disgraced. Felt sick. He had not meant to hurt her. He had just thought she was beautiful. That was all. And now he had possibly ruined her life along with his own. What was her name? He asked quietly. Checked his tablet. Eth. She's Ambassador Rand's daughter. She serves as a junior cultural analyst for the delegation. His daughter, his voice cracked. I caused an interstellar incident and publicly embarrassed the ambassador's own daughter. That's about right, yes. Lay back on his bed and stared at the ceiling. He wondered if it was possible to die of shame. Across the void of space, aboard the diplomatic vessel Silent Accord, Eth sat alone in her quarters. Her markings had finally stopped glowing, but she could still feel the heat in her skin. The memory of that moment kept playing in her mind. She had never lost control before, not once in her entire life. She had trained since childhood to keep her emotions hidden, to present a calm and logical face to the world. It was what every did. It was who they were. But when that human had looked at her, when he had said that word, something had broken inside her. Something old and buried had risen to the surface, and she had been powerless to stop it. Beautiful. She had never heard that word before, not directed at her, did not use such words. They did not comment on physical appearance. They valued intelligence, discipline, and service to society. The way someone looked was considered irrelevant. But that human had looked at her like she mattered. Not her position, not her family name, not her contributions to society. Just her. He had seen something in her that no one else had ever noticed, and he had spoken it out loud without shame. And she had felt something warm and bright that she did not have a name for. A knock came at her door. She knew who it was before she answered. Her father walked in. His face was like stone, his markings completely dark. He was furious, but he would never show it. "Do you understand what you have done?" he asked. "Yes, father." "You showed emotion in front of the entire delegation, in front of the humans. You made our family look weak. You made our entire species look weak." "I know, father, I am sorry." He stepped closer. "Sorry is not enough. I want an explanation. Why did you react that way? What did that human's words do to you?" Eth tried to find an answer. She tried to find logical words to explain what had happened. But there were no logical words. There was only the truth. "I do not know," she admitted. "No one has ever called me beautiful before. When he said it, I felt." She struggled for the right word. "I felt seen." Her father's expression flickered, just for a moment. Something crossed his face that might have been pain or might have been understanding. Then it was gone, hidden behind his usual mask. "Emotions are dangerous, Eth. You know this. They nearly destroyed our people once. We cannot let them control us again." "I know, father." "You will stay away from the humans. You will have no contact with them. After we return home, we will decide what to do about your future. Do you understand?" "Yes, father." He left without another word. Eth sat in the darkness of her quarters. She knew she should feel ashamed. She knew she should want to forget what had happened and return to being the perfect daughter she had always been. But she did not feel ashamed. She felt something else entirely. She kept thinking about the human, about his warm brown eyes and the way he had looked at her. There had been no calculation in that look, no judgment, just genuine, open admiration. He had seen her as she truly was, and he had thought she was beautiful. She wanted to feel that again. Before she could stop herself, she reached for her communication device. Her fingers moved across the screen, typing a message to the horizon's edge. It was a simple message, just a request for a private meeting with a human named Cole. She knew it was wrong. She knew it would make everything worse. She sent it anyway. Back on the horizon's edge, was still lying on his bed when his own device beeped. He picked it up, expecting a message from Captain Monroe telling him he was fired and would be ejected into space. Instead, he found a message from someone named Ev. She wanted to meet him, alone, on a neutral observation deck at the nearby space station. Read the message 3 times. His heart pounded in his chest. This was a terrible idea. He was already in enough trouble. Meeting secretly with the ambassador's daughter would only make things worse. But he kept thinking about the way her markings had glowed, the way she had stepped toward him, the way she had asked him to say it again. He picked up his jacket. It was definitely a terrible idea. He was going anyway. The observation deck was empty when arrived. It was a small room with a wide window that looked out into space. Stars filled the darkness like scattered diamonds. A nearby nebula painted purple and gold light across the glass. Stood near the window and waited. His heart was beating so fast he could feel it in his throat. He kept telling himself this was a mistake. He should turn around and go back to his ship before anyone noticed he was gone. But he stayed. The door opened behind him. He turned and saw her. Eth looked different from before. In the diplomatic hall, she had been dressed in formal robes like the other. Now she wore simpler clothes, dark and close-fitting. Her silver-blue skin seemed to glow in the starlight. Her luminescent markings were dim, almost invisible. She was nervous, could tell from the way she held herself, the way her eyes moved around the room before settling on him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "Thank you for coming," she finally said. Her voice was softer than he remembered. "I almost didn't," admitted. "I'm pretty sure this is going to get me in even more trouble than I'm already in. I am also certain this is unwise." A small smile touched her lips, and yet here we are. They stood facing each other across the room. The silence stretched between them, but it was not uncomfortable. It felt like the quiet before something important. "I wanted to apologize," said, "for what happened. I did not mean to cause you any problems. The words just slipped out. I should have been more careful." "You should not apologize." He blinked. "I shouldn't." "No," she took a step closer to him. "I came here because I have a question. I need to understand something." "Okay, what do you want to know?" She looked at him with those violet eyes, and her markings flickered with a faint light. "What does beautiful mean to your people?" The question surprised him. Of all the things she could have asked, he had not expected that. He thought for a moment before answering. "Beautiful is a word we use to describe things that move us," he said slowly. "Things that make us feel something deep inside. Things we find pleasing to look at, but also more than that. Beautiful can be a sunset or a piece of music. It can be a kind act or a brilliant idea. It can be the way someone laughs or the passion in their voice." He paused, trying to find the right words. "When I called you beautiful, I was not just talking about your appearance, although you are, very nice to look at." He felt his face grow warm. "I meant that something about you caught my attention, something that felt special, different from the others." Eth listened carefully to every word. Her markings grew slightly brighter as he spoke. "We do not have such a word in our language," she said. "Do not comment on physical appearance. We do not speak of things that move us. We value logic and contribution and service. The way someone looks is considered unimportant." "That seems sad to me," said honestly. "It is efficient." "Maybe, but is it enough?" She did not answer right away. She turned to look out the window at the stars. The nebula light painted colors across her skin. "We were not always this way," she said quietly. "Long ago, before I was born, my people had art and music. We had poets and painters. We celebrated beauty and emotion. What happened? War happened. Her voice grew heavier. A terrible civil war that nearly destroyed our entire civilization. It was caused by jealousy and passion and anger. Leaders made decisions based on their feelings instead of logic. Millions died. I was almost lost. She turned back to face him. After the war, our ancestors decided that emotions were too dangerous. They created new ways of living, new ways of thinking. They taught themselves to suppress their feelings, to hide their reactions, to present only calm and logic to the world. They believed it was the only way to survive. Understood now. The coldness of them was not natural. It was a defense mechanism, a scar left by ancient trauma. But you still have emotions, he said gently. Your markings proved that, you just hide them. Yes, we still feel. We just do not show it. We do not speak of it. We pretend it does not exist. That sounds lonely. Her markings flickered brighter. It is. They stood together by the window. The stars burned silently in the void. Felt something shifting between them, some invisible barrier beginning to fall. May I ask you something now? He said. Yes. Why did you want me to say it again? In the hall, when you stepped forward, you asked me to say it again. Why? Eth was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Because when you said it, I felt something I have never felt before. I felt seen. Not as a diplomat or a daughter or a representative of my people, just as me, just as her markings glowed soft pink. And I wanted to feel it again. His heart ached at her words. He could see how much courage it took for her to admit that. He could see the vulnerability beneath her calm surface. He stepped closer to her. They were only an arm's length apart now. You're beautiful, he said softly. He meant every word. Her markings bloomed with color. Gold and pink and soft purple light spread across her skin like sunrise over water. Her eyes shone. Her lips curved into a smile unlike any he had seen on a face. It was real. It was warm. It was alive. Thank you, she whispered. They talked for hours after that. They sat by the window and shared stories about their worlds, told her about Earth, about oceans and forests and cities full of people. He told her about music and movies and art galleries. He told her about love and friendship and family. Told him about her, about crystal cities and silent libraries. She told him about her childhood, about the pressure to be perfect and the loneliness of always hiding who she really was. She told him about her secret dreams of seeing the stars and discovering something new. They discovered they had more in common than either had expected. They both loved watching the stars. They both felt like outsiders in their own worlds. They both wanted something more than the life they had been given. By the time the nebula began to drift out of view, something had changed between them. They were no longer a human and They were no longer a linguist and a diplomat. They were just two people who had found something rare in the vast emptiness of space. They had found understanding. Reached out and took his hand. Her skin was cool against his, but gentle. Her markings glowed softly with contentment. I should go, she said reluctantly. My father will notice if I am gone too long. Will I see you again? She looked at him with those violet eyes. I hope so. I truly hope so. She stood to leave, but paused at the door. She turned back to him one last time. Say it again, human. Smiled, you're beautiful. Her glow brightened, then she was gone. Sat alone on the observation deck, staring at the stars. He knew that what he was doing was dangerous. He knew it could cause problems for both of them. He knew their worlds were very different and that there was no easy path forward. But for the first time in his life, he did not care about easy. He cared about her. And that was enough. The secret did not stay secret for long. Eth had been careful. She had taken a private shuttle to the space station. She had made sure no one from her delegation saw her leave. But they had eyes everywhere, and someone had noticed her absence. When she returned to the Silent Accord, her father was waiting for her. Ambassador Rand stood in the center of her quarters. His markings were completely dark, which meant he was working very hard to hide what he was feeling. His eyes, however, told a different story. They burned with cold fury. "Where were you?" Considered lying. She considered making up some excuse about needing fresh air or wanting to study human architecture, but she knew it would be pointless. Her father already knew the truth. He was just waiting for her to admit it. "I met with the human," she said quietly, "with Cole." The silence that followed was terrible. Ambassador Rand did not move. He did not raise his voice. He simply stood there, and the weight of his disappointment filled the room like poison. "I forbade you from contacting them," he said finally. His voice was calm, but there was something broken underneath it. "I specifically told you to stay away from the humans, and you disobeyed me." "Yes, Father." "Why? Help me understand. Why would you throw away everything, your career, your reputation, your family's honor, for a single conversation with a human?" She thought about his warm brown eyes and gentle voice. She thought about how it felt when he looked at her, when he said she was beautiful, when he held her hand. She thought about feeling alive for the first time in her life. "Because he saw me," she said. "He saw who I really am. Not my title, not my family name, just me. And he thought I was worthy of admiration." Her father closed his eyes. When he opened them again, the anger was gone. In its place was something worse. It was fear. "Emotions destroyed our people once," he said quietly. "They nearly wiped us from existence. I know you have learned this history. I know you understand why we must suppress our feelings. And yet you choose to let them control you." "I am not being controlled, Father. I am choosing to feel." "It is the same thing." He turned away from her and walked to the window, the stars reflected in his eyes. "I am trying to protect you. You do not understand what emotions can do. The jealousy, the rage, the grief, they consume everything. They burn everything down." "Perhaps," said, "but without them, what is left? We survive, yes. We continue to exist, but do we truly live?" Her father did not answer. "The humans are chaotic and emotional and messy," she continued. "But they are also kind and creative and full of wonder. They make art that serves no practical purpose except to make people feel something. They write poems about love. They die for people they care about. They are alive in a way that we have forgotten how to be." Ambassador Rand turned back to face her. His expression was unreadable. "You have a choice," he said. His voice was heavy with finality. "Sever all contact with the human. Forget what happened between you. Return to being the daughter I raised, or be disowned, exiled from space, cut off from your family and your people forever." The words hit like a physical blow. She had known this was coming, but hearing it spoken out loud was still devastating. "You would really do that," she whispered. "You would exile your own daughter." "To protect our people, I would do anything." His voice cracked slightly on the last word. For just a moment, saw the pain beneath his mask. He did not want to do this, but he believed he had no choice. "I need time to think," she said. "You have until the final council session tomorrow. After that, you will give me your answer." He left without another word. Sank onto her bed and stared at the ceiling. Tears ran down her cheeks, glowing faintly with bioluminescent light. For the first time in her life, she did not try to hide them. Aboard the Horizon's Edge, Captain Monroe had finally called into her office. She sat behind her desk with her fingers pressed together and an expression that could have frozen lava. "I know about your little meeting on the space station," she said. Did not bother denying it. "Yes, ma'am." "Do you have any idea what you have done? They are considering withdrawing from negotiations entirely. They were our best chance at protection against the Empire. Without their technology and support, human colonies across the sector are vulnerable. And you decided that meeting secretly with the ambassador's daughter was more important than the future of our species." The words stung because they were true, had not thought about the bigger picture. He had only thought about, "I'm sorry, Captain. I know I made a mistake." "A mistake?" Captain Monroe laughed bitterly. "You have potentially doomed us all because you could not keep your personal feelings separate from your professional duties." Nodded, he deserved every word of criticism. "Tomorrow there will be a final council session," Captain Monroe continued. "That will decide once and for all whether to proceed with the alliance. I want you there, but only because Ambassador Rand specifically requested your presence. You will apologize publicly. You will take full responsibility for everything. And you will do whatever it takes to save this alliance. Do you understand?" "Yes, Captain." He returned to his quarters, but he could not sleep. He kept thinking about. He wondered if she was okay. He wondered if she was also lying awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about him. He wondered if he would ever see her again. The next day, the final council session took place in the main assembly hall of the space station. Representatives from both species filled the room. Ambassador Rand sat at the center of the delegation, his face like carved stone. Beside him sat, her eyes red and her markings dim. Captain Monroe stepped forward to begin the formal proceedings, but Ambassador Rand raised his hand. "Before we continue," he said, "there is a matter that must be addressed. The incident involving the human translator has brought shame upon both our delegations. I have been told he wishes to apologize." All eyes turned to. He stood slowly, his heart pounding. He looked at, she would not meet his eyes. She looked defeated, broken, like a light that had been extinguished. Something inside him shifted. He had been planning to apologize. He had been planning to beg for forgiveness and take all the blame. That was what Captain Monroe wanted. That was what would save the alliance. But when he looked at, he realized something. An apology would not save her. It would only confirm that what had happened between them was wrong. It would tell her that feeling something, that wanting to be seen and loved and appreciated was shameful. He could not do that to her. He stepped forward and faced the delegation. "I was going to apologize," he began. His voice was steady. "I was going to say that what happened was a mistake, that I should have kept my personal feelings to myself, that humans need to be more careful around your people." Ambassador Rand nodded approvingly. "But I am not going to say those things, because they are not true." The room went silent. Captain Monroe looked like she wanted to kill him. "Humanity is not perfect," continued. "We have wars. We have conflict. We let our emotions guide us in ways that sometimes lead to destruction. But those same emotions are also what make us human. They are what drive us to create art that moves people to tears. They are what make us risk our lives for people we love. They are what push us to explore the stars, not for resources or power, but because we dream of wonders we have not yet seen." He turned to look directly at. Her eyes finally met his. "When I called your daughter beautiful, it was not a mistake. It was the most honest thing I have ever said. And her reaction was not a scandal. It was a miracle. It was proof that your people have not lost what makes you alive. You have only forgotten." Gasps echoed through the room. No one had ever spoken to this way. But was not finished. "I know your history. I know why you suppress your emotions. I know about the war and the suffering and the fear. But you cannot run from feeling forever. You cannot hide from who you really are. And if an alliance with humanity means you expect us to pretend that emotion is weakness, then perhaps we do not want that alliance after all." He took a breath. Because emotion is not weakness. It is what makes life worth living. The room was completely silent. Then slowly something began to happen. Throughout the delegation, luminescent markings began to flicker. Soft colors, long suppressed, started to appear on silver-blue skin. First one, then another, then a dozen more. They were glowing. They were feeling. Ambassador Rand stared at his own people in shock. For the first time, his careful mask slipped. He looked at his daughter, who was now glowing brighter than any of them, and something in his eyes changed. He had spent his whole life trying to protect his people from emotion. But maybe they did not want to be protected anymore. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. 1 month after the council session, news of what had happened spread to every corner of known space. The cold, logical, who had rejected alliance after alliance for centuries, had finally opened their doors. And they had opened them to humans, the messy, emotional, chaotic species that everyone else had dismissed as too primitive to matter. The stories varied depending on who was telling them. Some said it was a political strategy. Some said they had simply realized they needed allies. But those who had been in the room that day knew the truth. It had started with a single word: beautiful. The alliance between humanity and the collective was signed in a formal ceremony aboard the space station. But it was more than just a political agreement. It was the beginning of something new. As part of the treaty, both species agreed to a cultural exchange program. Humans would teach about art, music, and emotional expression, would share their technology and scientific knowledge. It was meant to be a practical arrangement, a way for both species to benefit from each other's strengths. But it became so much more than that. Changes began almost immediately. Art academies opened for the first time in 300 years. Young, curious about this strange thing called creativity, signed up by the thousands. Human artists were brought in to teach painting and sculpture and music. The first concert was held in the great Crystal Hall of the capital city. It was a simple performance, just a human violinist playing classical pieces from Earth. But when the music ended, the audience sat in stunned silence. Many of them had tears streaming down their faces, their markings glowing with colors they had never shown before. They had forgotten what it felt like to be moved. Poetry became surprisingly popular. Who had spent their whole lives reading technical manuals and scientific papers discovered the joy of words that served no practical purpose except to express feeling. Within months, poets were writing their own works, blending their precise language with this new emotional vocabulary they were learning. Not everyone embraced the change. Some older, like Ambassador Ran, remained skeptical. They worried that emotion would lead their people back down the path of destruction. They watched nervously as their children learned to laugh and cry and love, waiting for the chaos they were sure would follow. But the chaos did not come. Instead, something unexpected happened. As began to express their emotions, they did not become weaker. They became stronger. Researchers who had worked in cold isolation for decades found that collaboration and passion made their work better. Leaders who had relied only on logic discovered that understanding how people felt made them more effective. They were not destroyed by emotion, they were awakened by it. Eth became a symbol of this awakening. Her story, the diplomat's daughter who had fallen for a human translator, spread across both species. Some called her a traitor to her kind. Others called her a hero. Most simply called her brave. She was offered a new position as the chief liaison for the cultural exchange program. It was a role that would have been unthinkable a year ago. Working openly with humans, celebrating emotion, encouraging her people to feel. But Ambassador Ran himself had approved the appointment. When asked him why, he had given her a rare smile. "Because you were right," he said. "We were surviving, but we were not truly living. It took a human's careless words to make me see that." It was the closest thing to an apology she would ever get from him, but it was enough. Cole was also given a new position. Captain Monroe, despite her initial fury, had recognized that he had done something remarkable. His speech at the council session had changed the course of history. She offered him the role of humanity's chief cultural ambassador to the collective. He accepted immediately. The new joint research station was built in neutral space, halfway between human and territory. It was a place where both species could live and work together. Scientists shared laboratories. Artists shared studios. Families shared meals. It was not always easy. There were misunderstandings and arguments and moments of frustration. Humans found too formal, found humans too loud, but slowly, carefully, they learned to understand each other. And in the middle of it all were Ent. They had been given quarters on the same level of the station. They spent their days working side by side, helping their people learn from each other. And they spent their nights together, watching the stars through the observation deck windows, talking about everything and nothing. Had changed in the months since that first meeting. She smiled more. She laughed out loud. Her markings glowed constantly now, soft and warm colors that reflected her emotions without shame. She wore her feelings openly like a human, and she had never been happier. Had changed too. He had found purpose in a way he never had before. He was no longer just a linguist in the back of the room. He was a bridge between two worlds. He mattered. One evening, exactly 1 year after the incident that had started everything, they stood together on the observation deck. The same nebula from their first meeting had drifted back into view, painting the window with purple and gold light. Leaned against him, her cool skin pressed against his warmth. Her markings glowed softly in the darkness, shades of pink and gold that meant contentment and affection. "A year ago I was terrified of feeling anything," she said quietly. "I thought emotions were dangerous, shameful, something to be hidden and suppressed. And now—" She looked up at him. Her violet eyes shone in the starlight. "Now I cannot imagine going back to that cold, colorless existence. I would rather feel pain than feel nothing at all. I would rather know joy and sorrow than spend my life numb." Smiled. "Sounds like you've become almost human." "Perhaps I have," she smiled back, "or perhaps I have simply become myself." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars. Somewhere out in the galaxy, a species was remembering what it felt like to be alive. Artists were creating. Musicians were playing. Poets were writing. And it was all because one human had forgotten to keep his thoughts to himself. "Do you regret it?" asked. "The mistake that started all of this?" Thought about everything that had happened. The panic in the diplomatic hall, the terrifying meeting on the observation deck, the speech that had almost ended his career, the months of hard work and harder conversations. And then he thought about her smile and her glow and the way she looked at him like he was the most important person in the universe. "It wasn't a mistake," he said. "It was the most honest thing I've ever said." His glow brightened. She reached up and touched his face, her cool fingers gentle against his cheek. "Say it again, human." He had said it dozens of times over the past year. He had said it in the morning when she woke up and at night when she fell asleep. He had said it when she was happy and when she was sad and when she just needed to hear it. But every time felt like the first time. Every time made her glow. "You're beautiful," he said. She leaned closer and pressed her lips to his. Her markings blazed with light, so bright they lit up the entire observation deck. When they finally pulled apart, she was laughing, a real, joyful human laugh. "I love you," she said. The words were still new to her, a phrase she had only learned from humans, but she meant them with everything she had. "I love you too," he replied. They stayed on the observation deck until the nebula drifted out of view. Then they walked back to their quarters together, hand in hand, two people from different worlds who had found each other against all odds. Behind them the stars burned on. The galaxy was vast and cold and full of danger, but it was also full of possibility. And sometimes, all it took was one small moment of honesty to change everything. One careless word. One accidental truth. One human who looked at an alien and saw something worth admiring. And one alien who looked back and finally allowed herself to feel. This was not an ending. It was a beginning.